The air in the operations room at Fort Bragg was thick with anticipation. A wall of glowing monitors bathed everything in a sterile blue haze, the hum of servers louder than any voice. My commanding officer, General Donovan, leaned over the table and spoke in his gravel-deep tone. "Major Carter, the system is compromised. If we authorize the blackout protocol, we could lose the civilian data entirely." His eyes fixed on mine. He didn't say the other half of it. "The decision rests with you." On the largest screen, frozen in grainy clarity, was the face I knew better than my own reflection. The man who raised me, and the man who broke me. My father. I gave one sharp nod. "Authorize it, General." A wave of cold, deliberate calm washed over me, like I'd been preparing for this moment all my life. But less than 24 hours earlier, I wasn't a soldier in command. I was a daughter being told I wasn't welcome at my own family's celebration. The sun in suburban Atlanta was unforgiving that Sunday. I had driven nearly 4 hours from base, clinging to a thin strand of hope that maybe this Father's Day would be different. My dad, retired Colonel William Carter, was grilling steaks in the backyard of the home he'd renovated with my brother, Ryan. Ryan was the golden boy. He'd built a construction empire across Georgia, the real legacy my father bragged about at every dinner table. "Here's to my son, Ryan," and my dad boomed, glass raised high, "a man who builds something you can touch, something you can drive by on Main Street and point to with pride." The crowd of neighbors and old army buddies applauded. My mother smiled nervously, careful not to break the spell. Then my dad's eyes slid to me, his smirk sharp as broken glass. "And my daughter Emily, good to see you stepping away from your little computer games in that desk job." Laughter rippled through the guests. My gut twisted. I was wearing my uniform, starched and spotless, but to him it was nothing more than a costume. He cornered me by the grill a few minutes later, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "You know, every time I see you in that uniform, it just reminds me of what you're not." His gaze lingered on the house Ryan had built. "This day is about legacies. And yours doesn't belong here." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His dismissal was quieter, colder, sharper. I nodded once, swallowed the anger like I'd done since childhood, and walked out without another word. On the long drive back to base, I couldn't shake the irony. By shutting me out of Father's Day, he had no idea he'd placed his entire legacy into the hands of the one person he dismissed as a disappointment. Growing up, the rules had always been clear. There was one for Ryan, and one for me. I thought back to last Christmas. Ryan had unveiled a framed photo of a gleaming skyscraper his company had just finished. My father's eyes brimmed with tears. A monument to the Carter name, he'd whispered, voice thick with pride. Later that night, I told him I had been awarded the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. My team and I had stopped a cyber attack that could have taken down the power grid across 3 states. He barely looked up from his bourbon. "That's nice, sweetie. Did they give you a raise?" Then came the nickname. Major Misfire. He thought it was funny. To him, I wasn't a real soldier because I carried a clearance instead of a rifle. My mother pulled me aside after. "You know how your father is," as she whispered. "Ryan's work is something he can see. You need to understand that." Understand. Another entry in the lifelong ledger of being told to shrink. But in my other world, the one sealed off behind steel doors and encrypted systems, I wasn't Misfire. I was Oracle. Inside the command center, I commanded a team of the sharpest cyber warfare specialists in the country. They trusted my instincts without hesitation. General Donovan respected results, not family names. When he called me a good work, Oracle, it carried more weight than any applause in my father's backyard. That Father's Day evening, as I pulled back onto base, I made myself a promise. I would stop translating my world into a language my family refused to understand. The next morning, the world itself would translate for me. By 0600 the next morning, the operations floor was awake and humming. Coffee cups, badge clacks, the soft thunder of air handlers fighting the Carolina heat. I had just logged into the enclave when a blood-red banner cut across my primary screen. Tier 1. Active compromise. Vector, zero-day loader, polymorphic payload. Sector, private infrastructure with federal contracts. Affected, Ridge and Carter Development Group. For a heartbeat, I thought the system had glitched. Then my stomach dropped. Ridge and Carter was Ryan's flagship. Highways, municipal water plants, a new veterans clinic in Savannah. If their servers were locked, work sites would stall, payroll would freeze, bonded projects would miss milestones. And if the clinic's build schedule slipped, the VA penalties would hit like a hurricane. Talk to me, EI said, voice flat. IOC spread as fast, a specialist Nguyen answered, fingers dancing. Initial intrusion via a forged subcontractor portal. Loader we haven't seen, mutates on each execution. They're calling the payload mantis glass on dark channels. Ransom note? Not yet. Encryptor still crawling. They hit AD first, then project files, then financials. They're also beaconing out to a command node in Bucharest, hopping to 2 cloaked relays. Across the room, our legal liaison spoke into her headset. FBI Baltimore is on. They're working the domestic leads. I stared at the topology blooming on the wall display. It looked like frost climbing a window, beautiful if you forgot what it did to anything living underneath. My phone, face down on the desk, vibrated hard enough to creep toward the edge. The screen lit up and filled with the same 2 names, over and over. I silenced it without lifting a finger. Protocol before personal. Always. General Donovan stepped out of his glass-walled office with a tablet under his arm. He was a broad-shouldered statue of a man, carved from the word discipline. Major Carter, he said, voice low. FBI has requested DoD support. Ridge and Carter holds federal contracts tied to VA and DOT. The attack may disrupt critical timelines. He paused, reading my face. I know whose company that is. So do I, sir. His gaze stayed steady. Conflict of interest exists. Expertise also exists. You wrote the white paper on Mantis family loaders. You're the only officer here who's actually burned a live nest without collateral. You can recuse. Or I can assign you. Your call. 1,000 childhood dinners flashed through my mind. My father's lectures about chain of command, about real soldiers, about real work you could touch. I thought of the quiet in my mother's eyes, the ledger of tiny concessions I'd made just to keep the peace. I won't recuse, EI said. But I'll do it by the book. Donovan nodded once. Then you own it. We moved like a switch had flipped. I split the team, 1 cell to dissect the loader in a sandbox, 1 to build a surgical decryptor, 1 to mirror Ridge and Carter's environment inside our skiff. Nguyen started signature extraction while Sergeant Patel traced the beacons for a legal intercept. Assume the adversary placed tripwires, I told them. No cowbeer moves. We don't trip anti-tamper, we don't dirty the backups, and we do not, repeat, do not, touch HRU health files until I say. Copy, the room answered. The first ransom note finally popped at 0819, a black rectangle with a white insect sigil and clipped, polite English. Your network has been safely archived. Do not power down. Contact within 5 hours for key exchange. Attempts to remediate will destroy archive. Nguyen snorted softly. Safely archived. That's a poetic way to say we welded your doors shut. Get me every prior variant with that sigil, I said. Language, timing, relay patterns, all of it. My phone vibrated again. I turned it face down in a drawer and shut the drawer. By 0930 the FBI cyber liaison joined our secure bridge, face tight, eyes already tired. We're seeing the same loader seed in 2 Mid-Atlantic contractors, he said. But Ridge and Carter is the big fish. They have live milestones this week. If they miss, we start running into penalty clauses and public safety windows for road closures. Which makes them a lever, I said. The threat actor gets maximum pressure with minimum effort. Exactly. We'll keep the domestic subpoenas flowing. But, if this is who we think, their controller sits well outside my badge. Donovan folded his arms. We'll pick up that part, Agent. This tasking is under cyber command now. He ended the call, then turned to me. Spin a secure VTC with the company, FBI liaison, .observer. You brief. I'll chair. Yes, sir. It took 40 minutes to herd the right people onto one line. When the glass-walled boardroom of Ridge and Carter finally filled the main screen, I recognized the polished table I'd eaten Thanksgiving at 2 years ago. Ryan sat slumped at one end, tie loosened, skin grey. The CFO fidgeted with a legal pad, and outside counsel tried to look in control. At the head of the table, back straight, jaw set, sat my father. He looked smaller than he had in the backyard, as if the sun had finally revealed he was only a man and not a monument. The FBI liaison introduced the shift in authority and ceded the floor. General Donovan's voice filled the room like a bell. This is a national-level cyber incident affecting federally bonded projects. From this point forward, you will follow the instructions of my operational commander. You will not power systems down, pay a ransom, or communicate with the attackers without authorization. Do you understand? My father cleared his throat, finding his command voice from a lifetime ago. General, we'll cooperate fully. Anything you need from Ridge and Carter, you have it. He still didn't know who he was talking to. Donovan tipped his head toward the side of the frame, toward the empty chair beside him. Operational lead will brief, he said. Call sign, Oracle. I stepped into camera view. The first reaction wasn't sound. It was stillness. Ryan's jaw slackened. The attorney blinked like he'd misread the room's nameplate. My father's eyes widened and then, just for an instant, lost focus, as if his mind had to buffer reality before accepting it. Mr. Carter, I said, keeping my tone professional, neutral, military. Major Emily Carter, U.S. Army. I lead this operation. I let the words land. No apology. No family footnote. We've isolated the strain, I continued, tapping my tablet. The wall beside me lit with a simple flow. Mantis glass enters via a subcontractor portal using a poisoned single sign-on token. It laterally moves through AD and projects, then stages an encryptor. There are anti-tamper fuses tied to file hash deltas and service restarts. If you attempt to roll back blindly, you will detonate your own house. The CFO's pen stopped moving. The FBI has domestic leads, I went on, but the relay path is extraterritorial and controlled by a hostile group we've engaged before. My team has two feasible options. One is slow containment and staged restore with a high chance of partial data loss. The second is surgical blackout, a controlled strike on the command channel to sever keys and freeze the encryptor in place. If it fails, you lose everything that isn't already air-gapped. How high is lose everything? The attorney asked, voice thin. 40%, I said. On initial modeling. Ryan finally found speech. Emily, Major, are you saying? I'm saying this is now a military-directed response, I replied, cutting him off gently but firmly. Personal relationships are immaterial. My father leaned forward, the silver in his hair catching the boardroom lights. For years he had taught me about discipline, decisions, the weight of command. Now he was seeing those lessons reflected back in a place he never imagined, on his child's face. What do you need from us? He asked, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. Your authorization to proceed under our protocols, I answered. And your compliance with every instruction that follows. No improvisation. No side deals. No touching anything we haven't cleared. I could feel my team behind me, motionless, waiting for the hinge to swing. Somewhere in my closed drawer, my phone buzzed again, a caged insect that would not be fed. Understood, and my father said. He swallowed. You have it. I gave a single nod and turned slightly so only my team could see my face. Oracle to all elements, I said, steady as a metronome. Stand by to execute blackout planning. We move on my mark. On the screen, the boardroom seemed farther away, as if the camera had zoomed out on its own. The people there were suddenly very small. The decision, as always, was very large. And this time, it belonged to me. The command center pulsed with a nervous energy that morning, the kind of atmosphere where every breath felt too loud. My team was quiet, waiting for my decision. I stood in front of the wall-sized display, watching the fractal growth of the ransomware infection, like black ice spreading across a frozen lake. Oracle, Nguyen said softly, if we wait, the payload finishes in under 3 hours. After that, even blackout won't matter. They'll have eaten the whole system. I nodded, but didn't respond right away. My father's face lingered in my mind, grey and desperate in that boardroom. For years, he dismissed me as a hobbyist in uniform, a girl playing soldier while Ryan built skyscrapers. Now, his empire was one bad line of code from crumbling into ash, and the only barrier between survival and ruin was the daughter he had banished from Father's Day. General Donovan paced behind me. Major, you've seen the parameters. This isn't personal anymore. It's national infrastructure. Call it. His words were the anchor I needed. I turned to the team. Prepare blackout deployment, but hold execution. We'll walk them through the risk again. We reopened the secure VTC. My father leaned forward, eyes shadowed. Ryan looked pale, tapping his pen nervously against the table. Mr. Carter, I said evenly, you authorized us to proceed. Before we launch, you need to understand again, there is no undo. Blackout either severs the infection cleanly or burns everything down. 40% failure chance. That means payroll, contracts, every project blueprint, gone forever. The boardroom fell into suffocating silence. Ryan finally spoke, voice trembling. Dad, maybe we should just pay them. We can raise the money, wire it offshore. No, I cut in. Paying them doesn't guarantee recovery. It guarantees you'll be targeted again. Blackout is the only way to end this without handing over leverage. My father's gaze flicked from me to the general, searching for some alternative. None came. His voice cracked when he finally whispered, do it. Copy authorization, I said. Team, execute on my mark. Nguyen's fingers blurred across her keyboard. Patel monitored the live sandbox, and 2 analysts initiated the strike code. On the wall display, a red arc of traffic lit up as our code hunted for the controller. Command Relay 1 neutralized, a Patel reported. 2 cloaked relays left. Second relay severed, a Nguyen added, her voice clipped, professional. For a heartbeat, the infection graph froze. Then, like shattered glass melting under heat, the lines collapsed inward. Systems rebooted. Servers blinked green. Encryptor halted. A Patel breathed. Key cache seized. Data intact at 89%. We did it. The room exhaled as one. Relief, tempered by exhaustion. But I didn't smile. Not yet. On the VTC, the Ridge and Carter boardroom erupted, Ryan slumping forward in his chair, the CFO whispering frantic thanks, my father burying his face in his hands. Your system's stable, I said flatly. But you are under federal observation until further notice. This incident remains classified as a national security breach. You will comply with the Department of Defense until cleared. Emily, Orion said softly, looking at me like I was a stranger. You saved us. I didn't save you, I corrected. Protocol did. My duty did. Don't confuse the two. I disconnected the feed before my father could speak. When the boardroom vanished from the screen, Donovan gave me a long look. You handled that clean. Detached. Wasn't personal, sir, I said, though we both knew the lie. Later, as the skiff emptied out, I sat alone, staring at the faint reflection of myself on the dark monitor. The soldier in the glass looked steady, unshaken. But inside, the daughter was still hearing his voice from the grill the day before. This day is about legacies. Yours doesn't belong here. Now, his legacy existed only because mine did. And he would have to live with that truth for the rest of his life. Blackout brought us oxygen, but oxygen isn't peace. By noon, our enclave felt like the eye of a storm, quiet in the middle, everything howling at the edges. We pivoted from triage to containment, log ingest, indicator hunting, scouring for sleepers that might wake in a week and start the fire all over again. Oracle, post-action in 10, a Donovan called, already halfway to the briefing room. I slid into a chair with my team. The big screen showed 3 columns: what we know, what we suspect, what we can prove. I made us read the board out loud. It's a trick I learned in competence intel training. Truth gets sharper when it passes through a human voice. What we know, Ipertel began. Entry via poisoned SSO token from a subcontractor portal. Lateral movement through AD and project shares. Encryptor halted at 89% completion. What we suspect, a new yen continued. Controller infrastructure rented by a broker we've seen linked to a hostile syndicate with state ties. Possible insider reconnaissance weeks prior, based on time logs that don't match shift rosters. What we can prove, EI finished. Command channel severed. Keys seized. No ransom paid. Federal projects restored to operational timelines. Donovan folded his arms. Good. Now brief it to people who don't speak our language. At 1300 we ran the interagency update. FBI handled the domestic subpoenas. Lawyers asked about penalty clauses like they were the real apocalypse. A congressional staffer wanted a line he could read in a hearing without tripping on the jargon. I gave him one, if we prevented a man-made disaster from compounding itself. He nodded like it was scripture and dropped off the call. Between briefings, my drawer buzzed again and again. I let it. When you teach a dog not to beg, you don't toss scraps. By 1700 the floor had thinned. Nguyen set a fresh cup of coffee at my elbow. Boss, as she said, deliberately casual, a good shooting today. Team shooting, I corrected. She smirked. Sure. But someone still called the wind. When she left, I opened the drawer and stared at the phone. 19 missed calls. 4 voicemails from Ryan, 2 from my mother, 1 from my father, and a message thread that began with my name and ended with please. I locked the screen and closed the drawer again. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you control. At 2000, Donovan found me finishing the incident narrative. Work, he said. We took the back corridor where the hum of the server room pressed against the drywall like distant surf. You kept it clean, he said. You also kept it cold. Better than messy and warm, sir. Both are better than reckless. He glanced sideways at me. I'm putting you up for a joint commendation. It'll hit the machine tomorrow. I didn't answer right away. The fluorescent lights made the concrete glow a dull pearl. Sir, I said finally, I don't want this to be a story about me and my family. It isn't, he said. It's a story about the right officer in the right seat when it mattered. After a beat, what you do with your father is your business. What you did for the country is mine. When he left, I stood in the humming quiet and let the words file themselves where they belonged. 2 categories. 2 worlds. 1 spine. 3 days later, we sat with Ridge and Carter in a clean room review. This time, the boardroom's bravado had been replaced by notebooks and open eyes. Their CIO listened without arguing. Their foreman asked honest questions about 2-factor enforcement on dusty laptops in field trailers. Even their lawyer stopped saying exposure like it was a spell that could reverse time. My father was there, too, but quieter, as if he'd learned that volume and authority aren't synonyms. When the meeting ended, the others drifted out until it was just the 2 of us on opposite ends of the table where we'd carved Thanksgiving turkey once upon a steadier life. Major, he said, using the rank like a handrail. Thank you. I didn't sit. You're welcome, Mr. Carter. A flinch, small as a blink. He gestured to the chair. 5 minutes. I stayed standing. 3. He ran a thumb along a coffee ring in the wood grain, a habit I recognized from every kitchen table we'd ever owned. I misjudged you, he said. It was not dramatic. Not an appeal. Just 5 words placed carefully on the table. I know, I said. I was wrong about what the army is now. About what a soldier looks like. His mouth tightened. I was wrong about my daughter. The room felt vast for a moment, as if the roof had pulled away and left us under open sky. I held his gaze. I won't teach you how to talk to me, I said. I won't translate my world so you can tolerate it. If you want a relationship, you'll learn the language. He nodded slowly. Then I'll learn. Good, I said. Start by respecting the boundary that what happened in this room is professional. Not personal. You don't speak about it at barbecues. You don't turn it into a war story. You don't use it to fix the version of me you've been telling people for years. The faintest smile touched the corner of his mouth, sad but real. Orders received. Not orders, I said. Terms. I left before he could answer. Sometimes the victory is not the speech, it's the exit. Weeks folded into each other. We wrote advisories that field contractors could actually follow. We pushed patching windows that respected night pours and morning cranes. We met with an unending parade of people who wanted cyber to be magic and were always disappointed when it looked like maintenance. One morning in late summer, I returned from PT to find a small box on my desk. No card. Inside, a brass paperweight in the shape of a compass. Etched on the back, call the wind. I knew Nguyen's humor when I saw it. I knew my team's way of saying we see you without making a poster of it. That afternoon, Donovan called me into his office. A single folder lay on his desk, crisp as cathedral linen. You're being pinned up, he said, and the words landed like a clean landing after a hard jump. Effective next month. You earned it the long way. Quietly. I thought of my father's toast, something you can drive by on Main Street and point to with pride. Promotions aren't skyscrapers. They're scaffolds, temporary, necessary, meant to hold while you build the real thing. Thank you, sir, I said. He cleared his throat. There's a seat on the dais for 2 guests. You don't have to use them. I took the folder. I'll think about it. That night, my phone lit up with a message I hadn't expected, a forwarded email from the VA clinic project lead to Ridge and Carter. Appreciate the recovery. No delay to veterans services. See you at the ribbon cutting. Below it, a 1-line note from my father. If you attend, I will keep my distance unless invited. Then, after a long blank space, I'm trying to learn. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. No grand gesture. No rewrite of history. Just a man learning to live inside terms he didn't set. I typed a reply I could stand behind in the morning. I'll be there in uniform. You can be there as a citizen. That's enough for now. I hit send and powered the phone down. In the quiet that followed, the base felt like a ship at anchor, still but ready. Boundaries, I reminded myself, aren't punishments. They're the shape of a life you can live with. And mine, for the first time, felt like it fit. The day of the ceremony was one of those late summer mornings when the air carries both weight and clarity. I stood in front of the mirror in my dress blues, every ribbon aligned, every silver button polished to a shine you could almost see your reflection in. My hands were steady, but my chest carried a quiet thrum, the kind that came not from nerves but from recognition. This day mattered. The auditorium at Fort Liberty buzzed with low conversation, the kind of polite anticipation reserved for military traditions that feel both timeless and immediate. Rows of officers filled the seats, their uniforms immaculate, their faces solemn. My team sat together halfway down the aisle. Nguyen, Patel, and the others. They caught my eye and gave me the smallest nods, the kind of acknowledgement soldiers trade when words aren't enough. General Donovan took the podium, his voice carrying the gravel of too many battlefields and too many briefings. Today, he began, we honor an officer who demonstrated what service means when tested at the sharpest edge. Major Emily Carter turned a moment of national vulnerability into a case study in decisive leadership. She didn't just execute protocol, she embodied it. He gestured for me to step forward. The weight of hundreds of eyes followed me as I walked across the stage. When I halted, the general lifted the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel's insignia and pinned them carefully to my shoulders. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, he said softly, almost privately, before raising his voice for the auditorium, you define what it means to put mission before self. The applause was measured, respectful, but when I turned toward my team, I caught Nguyen grinning despite herself, and Patel clapping just a little too hard. They knew. They understood this wasn't about a promotion. It was about a boundary crossed, a line redrawn forever. Afterward, the reception was a blur of handshakes and polite congratulations. Donovan slipped close enough to murmur, "You've set the bar, Colonel. Don't lower it." Then he disappeared into the crowd like smoke. I found myself outside, standing in the quiet sunshine, the air tasting fresher after hours of recycled ventilation. My phone buzzed. A new email. The sender, Robert Carter. The subject line, Father's Day. For a long time I just stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. I almost deleted it unread. But something, curiosity, or maybe the instinct to see a storm through to its quiet end, made me open it. It's next week. I would be honored if you would be welcome. The words blurred for a moment before settling back into focus. Honored. Welcome. The two things I had chased like shadows through my childhood, now offered up in a fragile email. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. Just a vast calm, like the silence that falls after a firefight when all you hear is your own heartbeat. I closed the message, archived it, and slid the phone back into my pocket. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't acceptance. It was simply over. The life I had built no longer required his invitation. The family I had found, my team, my command, was already mine. And for the first time, that was enough. 6 weeks after the ceremony, life had settled into a new rhythm. My office at Fort Liberty overlooked the sprawling grid of the base, a view of tarmac, hangars, and barracks that seemed to stretch into forever. On clear mornings, I could see helicopters banking over the tree line, their blades catching sunlight like shards of glass. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The nameplate on my door still startled me sometimes, Lieutenant Colonel Emily Carter. A title my father once mocked as impossible now engraved in brass. The irony wasn't lost on me, but the truth was simpler. I didn't wear it for him. I wore it for every young soldier who would someday need someone to believe in them the way I had needed it. My team became my anchor. We weren't just analysts behind screens. We were a family forged in the pressure cooker of constant threat. Nguyen started bringing in donuts on Fridays, an unspoken tradition that softened even Patel's hard edges. Corporal Diaz, our youngest, decorated his workstation with action figures, insisting each represented one of us. Mine was a Wonder Woman figurine he painted in army camo. They called me Oracle Ian the Skiff, but outside, over late-night pizza boxes or morning runs, I was just Carter. And for the first time in my life, that was enough to feel whole. One evening, while finishing after-action reports, my inbox pinged again. Robert Carter. The subject line read, "Dinner?" Just us. I stared at it longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading. Another part of me, some stubborn shard of the daughter who used to beg for his approval, hesitated. I didn't reply. Not that night. Not the next. Instead, I threw myself into the work. Our unit was tasked with analyzing chatter about a new ransomware group targeting municipal water systems. The thought of entire cities left without clean water kept me awake at night. We built countermeasures, simulations, backdoors into our own defenses. When the operation wrapped, Donovan stopped by my office. "Carter," he said, dropping into the chair across from me, "you ever take leave?" I raised an eyebrow. "Occasionally." He gave a grunt that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "Your team looks at you like you hung the moon. But even moons go dark now and then. Take a long weekend. That's an order." I almost protested, but the truth was my shoulders ached from weeks of 12-hour days, and my coffee intake was bordering on criminal. So I took his advice. That Saturday, Nguyen dragged me to a farmer's market downtown. I hadn't been in civilian crowds in months, and it felt strange to walk among stalls of sunflowers, homemade jam, and kids chasing each other between food trucks. "See?" Nguyen said, handing me a lemonade. "Life exists outside encrypted servers." I almost laughed. Almost. Then, out of nowhere, I spotted him. My father. Standing by a stall of leather belts, hands behind his back like a soldier at parade rest. His hair looked thinner. His posture wasn't as rigid as it once was. He didn't see me at first. I could have turned and walked away. Instead, I walked over. "Emily," he said, startled but not displeased. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," I answered. We stood in the middle of the market, strangers in plain clothes. He cleared his throat. "You look well." "So do you," I lied politely. His eyes had shadows under them I hadn't noticed before. He gestured toward a small cafe on the corner. "Would you sit with me for a few minutes?" I thought of Donovan's words. Moons go dark. Boundaries are doors you control. So I nodded. The cafe was quiet, filled with the smell of coffee beans and warm bread. We sat by the window, awkward at first. "I wanted to apologize," he began. "Not just for Father's Day. For years." His voice was uncharacteristically soft. "I measured you against a standard that was never fair. Against myself. Against Ryan. I didn't see who you were becoming." I listened, not speaking. letting him carry the weight of his own words. "You don't have to forgive me," he said. "I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to hear me say it." I stirred my coffee slowly. "I don't need an apology," I said finally. "I needed respect. And I built a life where I have it, without you. That doesn't mean the door is closed. But it means you don't get to walk through it on your terms." His eyes watered, whether from age, regret, or both, I couldn't tell. He nodded. "Understood." We sat in silence for a while, watching people cross the street outside. For the first time in years, the quiet between us wasn't hostile. Just or unfinished. When I stood to leave, he didn't try to stop me. He just said, "Thank you for sitting with me." I walked back into the sunlight, lemonade cup still in my hand, and realized something startling. I wasn't angry anymore. The war for his recognition had ended. The peace I carried was mine, not borrowed from him. And that was the kind of legacy no one could take away. The following month, I was back in my element, inside the skiff, the blue glow of monitors painting the room in the same sterile light I had come to call home. We were knee-deep in a new threat campaign, a series of silent probes crawling through municipal systems in the Midwest. Unlike the flashy ransomware of Ridge and Carter, these intrusions were patient, methodical. Whoever was behind them wasn't after money. They were after leverage. Tracer shows lateral hops from an energy co-op in Ohio, Patel reported, typing fast. Looks like they're building a ladder through smaller utilities to get to a bigger grid. Confirming staging malware, a Nguyen added, eyes flicking across 3 different windows at once. This isn't smash and grab. They're digging in for long-term persistence. I leaned closer to the central display. Which means they're planning to stay invisible until it matters most. General Donovan entered. His presence cutting the air like a blade. "Colonel Carter, your lead again. This has the fingerprints of a state actor. Congress is already breathing down our necks. Don't give them a reason to say we were slow." I nodded once. Understood. Inside, though, the weight pressed differently this time. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just familiar. Like the past had returned wearing a new mask. That night, after 18 straight hours, I sat alone in my office, the base quiet except for the distant whine of a generator. My inbox pinged again. Robert Carter. Subject, checking in. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. The body of the message was short. "Hope you're safe. I read about the energy probe on the news. You're probably already working it. Just wanted you to know I'm proud of you." The word caught me off guard. Proud. A word he had once reserved exclusively for Ryan, for football trophies and construction contracts. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I didn't delete it either. Instead, I pulled out the leather notebook I kept in my desk. It wasn't official. It wasn't for operations, or strategy, or lessons learned. It was personal. A place where I tried to make sense of the chaos outside the firewall. I wrote down for words, "Pride can't be borrowed." Then I shut the notebook and got back to work. 2 days later, our probe into the energy hack escalated. We traced command traffic to a relay bouncing through servers in Nevada, a false flag attempt, but not a perfect one. The language fragments embedded in the payload told the real story. Cyrillic subroutines. A familiar signature. This is the same group that hit Ridge and Carter, a Nguyen said, her tone low. They've shifted targets. The realization landed like a cold wind. Whoever had tried to gut my brother's empire hadn't just disappeared. They had pivoted to something far larger, something that could cripple entire regions if left unchecked. I stood, my voice steady. Spin up containment drills. Mirror the utilities environments in Sandbox. We'll practice until we can cut these intrusions blindfolded. The team moved instantly. No hesitation. No questions. This was why they were my family, because when I spoke, they trusted not just my authority but my judgment. That weekend, Donovan summoned me to his office. His desk was bare except for one folder and a mug of black coffee. You're carrying two wars, he said. One inside these walls, one outside them. You want my advice? I raised an eyebrow. Always. He leaned back. Don't let the second war bleed into the first. You're too damn good at this to be distracted by ghosts. Are you talking about my father? I'm talking about anything that keeps you staring at a door you already closed. His eyes softened for a moment. Respect isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's distance. I nodded, though the words churned long after I left his office. The next day, I met Ryan. He had requested it, surprisingly, through a carefully polite email. We sat across from each other at a diner just outside the base. He looked older, lines carved deep around his eyes, his once flawless confidence dulled. I didn't come here to argue, he said quickly, like he knew I might bolt. I just wanted to say, thank you. For saving the company. For saving Dad, even if he won't admit it. I stirred my coffee slowly. You don't owe me thanks. That was duty. Still, he said. His voice cracked slightly. I used to think I was the one carrying the Carter name. Turns out, I was just borrowing it. You're the one who actually built something lasting. The honesty disarmed me more than any attack vector could. For a moment, I saw not the golden boy who had overshadowed me for decades, but just my brother, tired and humbled. We parted on quieter terms than I expected. Not healed. Not reconciled. But no longer enemies. Back at the skiff, the wall display lit up with a fresh red alert. The attackers had shifted again, this time targeting transportation grids along the East Coast. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about disruption, chaos, leverage. As the room roared to life around me, I felt the ledger inside me reset again. My father's pride, my brother's thanks, my family's ghosts, they were noise. The real war was right here. And in this war, I wasn't the daughter fighting for scraps of validation. I was Oracle. And Oracle never flinched. The East Coast crisis broke like a storm. One morning, commuters woke to stalled trains, darkened tunnels, and airports paralyzed by cascading failures. The enemy hadn't breached planes or rails directly. They'd poisoned the systems that scheduled, tracked, and coordinated them. It was chaos without fire, disruption without blood, but the terror it sowed was just as real. Our skiff glowed with urgency. Dozens of screens lit the walls, data pouring across them like floodwater. Port Authority grid offline, a Pertel reported, voice tight. Secondary reroute servers are being chewed up. They're not going after money this time. They want panic. Nguyen slammed a pen against her desk. This is deliberate timing. Friday before a holiday weekend. Maximum pressure, minimum resources to fight back. I stood at the center, headset snug against my ear, posture sharp. We treat this as battlefield disruption. Build parallel command nets. Split traffic across mirrored nodes before they can choke it all. The team moved like muscle memory. Every keystroke a step in choreography we'd rehearsed but never wanted to dance for real. The enemy had upgraded their tactics, layering dicker intrusions over genuine ones, hiding poison needles inside haystacks of false data. Donovan strode in, his gravel voice cutting through the clatter. Carter, you own this. White House wants hourly updates. Yes, sir. For the next 6 hours, we lived inside the attack. When one system stabilized, another collapsed. When one beacon was severed, 3 more flared like Hydra heads. My voice was the metronome, steady, clipped, absolute. Patel prioritized transit hubs tied to hospitals. Nguyen, track every beacon with Cyrillic headers. Diaz, give me redundancy across state lines. Piece by piece, we pulled the transport system out of the fire. By midnight, we had wrestled the chaos back into its cage. It wasn't victory, just survival. The East Coast limped, but it moved. That was enough. When the last screen flickered green, my team exhaled. Nguyen leaned back, rubbing her temples. Oracle, that was. Not luck, EI interrupted. Discipline. Document everything. We'll debrief at 0900. But when they filed out, their exhaustion finally catching them, I stayed behind. The quiet after a crisis is always the loudest. That's when I saw it. My phone. One new message. Robert Carter. Saw the news. I know you can't talk about it. But I know it was you. Your mother and I are proud. Always proud. Now. I stared at the words. Always proud. It was a lie, and we both knew it. Pride had never been constant. It had been rationed, conditional, a currency doled out to Ryan while I was left bankrupt. And yet, part of me wanted to believe it, to take the words and hold them like a medal. I closed my eyes and let the feeling pass. Pride wasn't his to give anymore. It was mine to claim. I archived the message. Not deleted. Not saved. Just stored away, like a relic that no longer ruled me. The following week, Donovan called me into his office. The blinds were drawn, the overhead lights dim. A single folder sat on his desk. You'll want to sit for this, he said. I stayed standing. Your actions during the transport incident are being written into doctrine. Case study material. But you're also on someone's radar. Senate wants testimony. They'll want you to walk them through how you held the line. I let out a slow breath. They'll dress it up like a parade. But it'll be politics. Correct, Donovan said. And politics doesn't scare me. But it'll drag your name into lights you don't need. You ready for that? I thought of the paperweight Nguyen had given me, etched with Call the Wind. I thought of the Wonder Woman figurine on Diaz's desk. I thought of the team that looked to me not for showmanship, but for steadiness. I don't need lights, EI said. But I won't shy from them. If the Senate wants to hear how we held the line, then I'll tell them. And I'll make sure they understand it wasn't me, it was us. Donovan gave the faintest smile. That's why you're the right one for it. That night, after a 14-hour day, I finally drove off base. The city was alive, neon signs flickering, diners buzzing, sidewalks crowded with people who had no idea how close they'd come to paralysis. I parked and walked until I found myself in front of my father's office building. The Ridge and Carter logo still glowed proudly at the top. Glass and steel, solid, permanent, the kind of legacy he once worshipped. I stood on the sidewalk, looking up. Once, I had begged to be part of that legacy. Once, I had believed acceptance meant carving my name into his monument. Now, I knew better. My legacy wasn't brick or steel. It was unseen, encrypted, hidden in logs and code. Invisible, maybe, but no less real. It wasn't something he could own, dismiss, or redefine. It was mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to walk inside. When I returned to my apartment, there was another message waiting. Not an email this time. A letter. Paper. My father's handwriting across the envelope, careful and deliberate. I didn't open it. Not that night. Not the next. It sat on my desk for a week, a silent reminder that some doors stay closed until you choose to unlock them. And for once, I realized there was no urgency. No deadline. No mission clock. The war for his approval had ended. The only battle left was the one I chose to fight. And I was winning. The Senate chamber was colder than I expected. Not physically, the air was fine, but the atmosphere carried a chill born from power, scrutiny, and performance. Rows of suited staffers filled the gallery, their pens ready to turn lives into talking points. Cameras were perched like hawks. I sat at the long table in my dress uniform, silver oak leaves gleaming on my shoulders. Nameplate in front of me, Lieutenant Colonel Emily Carter. The microphone hissed faintly, amplifying silence before any words were spoken. A senator leaned forward, his voice rehearsed for evening news. Colonel Carter, the committee thanks you for your service. We want to understand how the East Coast transportation crisis was contained. In your words, what happened that day? I inhaled slowly. This wasn't the skiff. This wasn't my team. But I remembered Donovan's advice. Tell the truth, clean and simple. Senator, what happened was the attempted collapse of civilian life. Transit grids, airports, shipping hubs, all targeted simultaneously by a hostile actor. Their goal wasn't money. It was paralysis. Pens scratched across notepads. Cameras clicked. But it didn't collapse, I continued. Because ordinary soldiers in a windowless room trusted each other. They trusted discipline. They trusted training. We mirrored systems, split traffic, and cut the enemy out of their own control. That's how we held the line. The senator cleared his throat. And your role in this? I kept my tone even. I commanded the team. But command doesn't mean heroics. It means giving clarity when clarity is scarce. My job was to keep them steady until the storm passed. And they did the rest. Some senators nodded as if they understood. Others were already thinking about how to phrase my words for headlines. That didn't matter. I hadn't come for applause. I had come to make the record clear. After the testimony, I walked out into bright DC sunlight, blinking at the sudden shift from cold formality to bustling streets. Nguyen and Patel were waiting across the plaza, out of uniform, grinning like kids who'd gotten away with something. "Colonel, you were a rock star in there," Patel said. I shook my head. Rocks don't care if anyone notices them. That's why they last. They laughed, and in their laughter I felt something lighter than pride, belonging. Back at Fort Liberty, the rhythm resumed. Reports, drills, small crises that never made the news. The letter from my father still sat unopened on my desk. One night, after a 14-hour shift, I finally slit it open. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered. "Emily, I don't know the right words. I spent too long believing legacies were made of concrete and steel. Watching you, I see they're made of decisions, of people, of integrity. I can't take back the years I made you feel smaller. But I can tell you now, I see you. I am proud, not of what you did for us, but of who you are. Dad." I set the letter down. The words didn't break me. They didn't heal me. They simply were. And for the first time, I understood something. I didn't need him to see me. My team saw me. My command saw me. I saw myself. That was enough. Months later, at the ribbon cutting of the VA clinic Ryan's company had rebuilt, I stood in uniform at the back of the crowd. The governor spoke. The press took photos. Ryan shook hands with dignitaries. And then I noticed my father, standing quietly among the veterans in the audience. He didn't push forward. He didn't boast. He simply stood, watching the ceremony unfold. When his eyes met mine across the crowd, he gave the smallest nod, no performance, no pretense. I returned at once, then turned back to the clinic. The real legacy wasn't the building, or the nameplate, or the ribbon being cut. It was the people who would walk through those doors and find care, because a crisis had been stopped before it stole their future. That was enough. Later, back at base, my team gathered in the mess hall. Nguyen raised a glass of soda. "To Oracle," as she said, grinning. I shook my head. "To us." They clinked cups, laughter echoing through the room. In that moment, I realized something so simple it felt like revelation. Family isn't always blood. Legacy isn't always monuments. Respect isn't something begged for. It's built, one decision at a time, until it stands taller than any skyscraper. When I left that night, the air outside was cool, the stars clear. My phone buzzed with another message from my father. I didn't read it right away. I didn't need to. Because I had already built a world where my peace wasn't a negotiation. It was a fact. And for the first time in my life, that fact was unshakable.